It was bad. I mean, it got really bad there for a while. And, like I said, it was one of those times when God was saying, okay, I'm
still here.
I've let you do this. I've let you do the things that you wanted to do. Look where it got you. Look where you're at.
He was gently telling you.
You're sleeping in the bed of a Chevy truck at night, and I'm still here. Or what are we going to do? Are you smarter than a fifth grader now?
Oh, man.
Are you going to go back to that little bit of knowledge that I gave you as a kid?
Welcome back, everybody. Of course, I'm Kevin Wester, and this is Jesus Stories at the First Methodist Church of Burnet. And I'm excited every time, and what I've found is that I get to talk to the people that I love the most, and that's certainly true here with Jesus Stories. And talking with Ken Roberts today. How are you doing today, Ken?
Doing good, brother. Doing good. Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
No problem at all, man. That we're trying to talk to everybody, and so you expressed an interest in, and we said, "Man, yeah, that's our guy." That guy. We want to get in your head, Ken.
Oh, that's a nasty place to be. It's a nasty place to be. It's dark.
All right. So before we get started, once again, we'd like to give thanks to Jason Birdwell, and Emily Daylor is here, and she's pressing the buttons and keeping us on camera and making sure that we can be heard. And so thank you for that. So call out and say hi, Emily.
Hello, everybody.
All right. I hope y'all could hear that. So we're looking forward to that. Now, generally how we get started, all right, is I usually just start with, what's your first memories about God and how that was in your life? Tell us something about that.
I would have to say my first memories are when I was just a young kid. It's, being able to remember back to this point is a blessing because it was probably first, second grade. We lived in Kermit, Texas, and Bellevue Baptist Church is where we were going to church at. My parents had moved my grandmother out from California. Mm-hmm. First thing my grandmother did when she got to Kermit, Texas was found herself a church because she'd gone to church her entire life. Taught Sunday school, her entire life. So she wanted someplace to be close to God. So she made sure, she was a big influence on my parents, making sure that me and my little brother, who would come along a little bit later on, that we would be in church. And that was my first experience with Bellevue Baptist. I still remember going to vacation Bible school. I still remember Sunday school class. I still remember sitting in the pew with that red carpet and the red pew pads. I still remember all that. So,
yeah, that just goes back to it's getting to be a reoccurring theme here that we find out that it's so important, man, that our kids' programs and everything else, and getting your kids involved and bringing them here. And, it was the same thing with Carrie and others, and now with you. And so, it's just got to be so important, and we know that it is. So,
yeah, it's really wild how you mentioned the ebb and flow. It's really wild how the country, has gone from, the vast majority of the population went to church, mm-hmm. in the early, 20th century to. Then you go through the war years and people would get away from it, and then you'd cycle back to church. And one thing that I kind of found interesting is a lot of times it was the women in the family that were driving that. They really were. Yeah. As men, we're charged to be the spiritual head of the church, the spiritual head of the family, rather.
We're supposed to be, yeah.
But there's so many times it's the women in the family that are driving that.
And the funny thing is it turned out to be my grandmother, too. And it was Grace Grants. We lived in, I love you, Grace. I can't wait to have her dumplings again when I see her on the other side. But, man, we would come from Austin, and then we weren't attending a church. And it was the same thing. She wanted it to be important in her daughter's, life, to spread it to us. And so when we got to Dallas, you were going to church. And it was a no-brainer. You were going. And so I have those first memories. So I would say that she planted the seed, and so that's really super important. No matter how you get there, plant the seed with your kids, man, and it's going to pay off in the long run, right?
It will. Bible says, teach your kids the way they should go, and when they're older, they won't depart from it.
Yeah, try to demonstrate it or something.
You have to at least demonstrate it. You do. I mean, and she taught me more about the importance of the study part of it as well, because she taught her Sunday school class. So on Saturdays was devoted to preparing for her Sunday school lesson.
Right.
So you didn't mess around at Granny's house on Saturdays at all. You could go down there, but you better respect the fact that she's sitting in her living room in her little chair, preparing for her class, reading her D.L. Moody material, and that was just one thing that you had to understand, that you didn't mess with that time.
It was too close to the Sabbath.
It was. There was a lot of things she would tolerate, but you don't mess with her Saturday study time, her Saturday Bible study.
Well, she was dedicated, and that was basically her life, and that's the demonstration that she gave you, and so that's good. What about so you start? Is this before you were going to school, or so did you start school and something was happening?
Well, I was in first, second grade then, whenever we lived in Kermit. And my dad's job took us to Monahans, which is 23 miles down the road. Now, mind you, we're 23 miles down the road. 23 miles can have a big influence.
Yeah.
Because now we're not sitting 2 houses down from my grandmother Allen. And now we start to sleep in on Sundays. Wednesday evening comes along, everybody's tired from work, or you got to get ready for school the next day.
Right.
So there was a huge slide away from going to church.
Life starts taking over.
Well,
if you're not careful,
it was allowed to take over, and that 23 miles made a big difference.
I guess.
And I still remember my grandmother. So find a church yet?
Oh,
are you going to church?
That's good.
So
yeah,
kids at Sunday school.
Mm-hmm.
You at least taking the kids to Sunday school?
That's great.
But the ability to get away from that influence, I say get away. The not having that daily influence there made a huge difference for a few years.
It really is, and studying fits in with that too, like you said. So, just filling yourself with the Word, it just helps with the staying connected throughout the week. Not just on Sunday. But so, did y'all find a church, or so what happens with this?
We eventually did. I mean, my parents, my mom especially, she found a Baptist church for us to go to there, Bethel Baptist there in Monahans, and which is a church that we'll talk about later on that I ended up going back to as an adult. But we ended up at Bethel Baptist Church. That church ends up in a split. Now, mind you, this is in the 70s. This is when the charismatic movement is really taken off. It was the thing at the time. So the church has a split. The pastor that was there, my parents followed him, and he turned more charismatic. He went down that road. And that was kind of the time that I drew into myself, I guess you'd say, for lack of a better term. It wasn't that I lost interest. I didn't seem to have the same interest my parents did. It was so much different than what I'd learned up to that point, or what my grandmother had taught me up to that point. What I'd gained from her.
So the new thing that they were looking into was a lot different than what you had been exposed to.
It was so much different, and I pushed away from it.
Confusion.
My faith in God didn't waver or anything like that. It was just more of a, okay, this is something I'm not comfortable with. So there was a period of years there, probably for, I would say at least 10 years, where me and God didn't have a close relationship. God was always there. God was always, let me know that He was there in my life. But I would I treated Him like the neighbor that you talk to in passing.
Mm. So, I mean, did your parents notice that you had pulled away, and were they interested in that, or did they just not notice, or they?
My mom noticed, and she tried to get me more involved with different things in the church that was being formed, with the youth group and things like that. and I participated. I mean, I don't want to say I did what I was told, but I put forth some effort.
Yeah.
But it was still it was something foreign to me. It was almost like being dumped in a different country.
It seemed like, did it seem totally different, like a different message almost?
It did. It really did. It, to a large degree, because, with the charismatic movement at that time, with the speaking in tongues and the, interpretation of tongues and all that.
Yeah.
I really didn't have a good grasp of what was going on there.
I'm sorry, Ken. I just got tingles, man.
Yeah, it was really wild, because I knew enough about, the day of Pentecost.
Yeah.
And the different languages that were spoken at the day of Pentecost.
Sure.
And it actually named the languages.
Right.
These were languages that were spoken at that time.
That's
so
right.
whenever they start talking about speaking in tongues and interpretation and things like that, to me, it was something that I looked at and I thought, hold it a second. This isn't really it doesn't make sense to me. So I'm going to sit back and just watch and see how this plays out.
Yeah. Well, listen, I mean, that's just smart. So there's nothing wrong with that.
I became a skeptical Christian, for lack of a better term.
You wanted more information, man.
I wanted more information, and I wasn't sure of how deep the information was going to get that I was being fed.
So about how old are you right at this moment?
I'm 60.
No, okay. How about at that moment? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, at that moment.
Yeah.
Let's see. I would imagine junior high, maybe.
Okay.
7th grade, 8th grade. Somewhere in there.
And are you? So you're going with them, but you're not sure of the message.
Yeah, I'm going to church like I'm supposed to, but I wasn't real sure of the message. I wasn't being fed the way I was being fed when I was younger, and I kept that. I don't want to call it a healthy skepticism, I guess you would call it. I wanted to make sure that what I was being fed was what was right.
Yeah.
And I'd lost some of that influence with my grandmother, because we weren't going to Kermit as often. So I wasn't able to bounce this stuff off of my grandmother to say, hey, look, feed me some truth here. Feed me some information that I need.
Was she considering the same message, this charismatic?
No.
So she's still just
she's diehard Southern Baptist,
Okay.
No drinking, no dancing, no, carousing after 10 p.m. on Friday night. Yeah, she was very solid in her faith. She never wavered once from her faith.
Right.
This was something that my parents, and God bless my parents. I mean, it wasn't anything that they were trying to lead us down a wrong path, lead me and my brother down a wrong path or anything like that. They truly believed, what they were following.
They were feeling it.
Yeah, and nothing against, anybody, that's in the charismatic movement or anything like that. They still, the ones that I've been exposed to still preach the Trinity. They
Amen.
Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
The death and resurrection. There's just some differences in beliefs there, and
it's almost like the difference in the sections of Christianity. I mean, it's just one of maybe a small difference that some people are comfortable with and some people aren't. I mean,
it's from my own learning, my own Bible study. There's not anything that I saw there that would, they were teaching the Roman road. They were teaching salvation.
Yeah.
So we're all going to get there. We may end up taking some different paths, and there may be some correction along the way. There may be some correction once we finally get to heaven. So, but it's I don't want to belittle somebody else's faith
or good man
or say that they believe wrong. It's just something that I wasn't comfortable with.
Yeah. Listen, man, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but Wes Birdwell is going to understand this. One of the first times that I talked to Wes Birdwell, and we kind of talked about this subject, and then it turned into a great friendship. But I said, well, I said Christianity and the different sections of it. It's basically like cigarettes. How do you like that, Ken? And let me bring it in now.
Former smoker, here we go.
All right. Well, everybody's got their dose, right?
Yeah.
Some people like Marlboros, and some people like Winston's, and some people need Cools or Newports. And that's what they go to. And that's where they get fed.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that I just like to concentrate on Jesus. I tell everybody that, I'm a Christian and I worship with the Methodists and I'm very comfortable with the way that they worship here.
Yeah.
But so, that's how I kind of explain those different ways, is that some people are going to respond to, the Winstons, and some people are going to respond to the Marlboros. But as long as we're putting Jesus first, that's the important thing. And I think that somewhere in my heart, I just think that the Pentecost are going to make it. Some of them are going to make it to heaven too, just hopefully the Methodists, right? And the Baptists.
Hopefully someday we'll all make it there. But
I got you.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that as long as you're teaching, the Trinity, and as long as you're teaching the Roman road for salvation,
the cross, the resurrection.
We're going to have our differences in beliefs, but as long as you're teaching those things,
as long as you're including that, well, then I can, listen to you.
Yeah, we can talk. We can have a healthy discussion.
I think that that's important, man. I think that that's important. And so, man, you're in junior high. What happens through high school? At some point, do you start thinking about, the military, or what about?
Didn't come till way later. Now, my high school years, they were rebellious years.
Okay.
I was a typical Gen X teen when it come to high school.
Yeah,
I was whatever.
Me too, buddy.
Kind of mentality, and I was extremely rebellious. There was a lot of drinking going on. Luckily, I never did any drugs or anything like that.
Yeah. Oh, that's a blessing.
But yeah, it really is. It really is. I always say, but for the grace of God, there go I, because I had so many friends that ended up going that path.
Well, and plus also considering, the things that, you wanted to do later in your life, man, that could have ruined it. If you ever had that and you got caught for something like that, well, then that would ride with you. It would have ruined everything that God had planned.
It would have completely changed the trajectory of my life at that point. But no, there was a lot of rebellion in high school. I got to a point to where I was working. I started working at a really young age. I started working when I was 12, 13 years old.
Did your dad instill that in you? Did they say you needed to go? Or how did
No, it was more my grandfather on my dad's side. My grandfather on my dad's side, my dad's family, God bless them, they were never churchgoers. They were never churchgoers. My grandfather on my dad's side left home when he was like 12, 13 years old and started chasing oil field money. He was working in an oil field as a kid. And so when I would go spend summers with them, that's what I did. I worked. So 12, 13 years old, I'm working all summer long in the oil fields for my granddad, making my own money. And that began to influence my work later on in high school. Work became a priority for me.
Thank God.
Work would give me the ability to do the things that I wanted to do, but it also gave me an excuse to get away from church.
I got to go to work.
Exactly.
Hey,
exactly.
You want me to have a job, don't you?
I would volunteer for those Sunday shifts. I was working at a grocery store through high school.
Wow.
All the way through high school, I was working at a grocery store. And so,
what's the name of the store? Come on, tell us what grocery store.
At the time, it was M System.
Okay.
It was based out of San Angelo.
Texas.
Now it's Lowe's.
Oh, well.
Now it's Lowe's.
We know Lowe's.
But I would volunteer for those Sunday shifts because those Sunday shifts, hey, I've got to work.
Yeah.
And that's kind of sealed my rebellion.
You think it kind of developed into that because you weren't sure about the message still? Or you found some other interest?
Well, I was
the drinking and the stuff.
The drinking and running around. I had a lot of
running around.
A lot of peer influence. I succumbed to a lot of peer influence over parental influence, influence from the people that I was going to church, the kids that I was going to church with. I felt more to my peer influence. I spent a lot of time at work in high school. I'd get out of school and be at work at 4:00, and the store was open till midnight, and I'd work till midnight.
Wow.
And get up and go to school the next morning and do it all over again. So I actually spent more time with the people that I worked with than I did with my parents.
Right.
Or the people that I went to church with. So I let myself be influenced by that, and I let myself be influenced to the point that I made the work a priority to be able to stay away from church.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's funny that the kids that are in the same condition, because it was true for me too, man, that I just didn't want to deal with any of that, man. I was going out and skipping a couple classes a day generally, and we'd have a few beers and then we'd come back. But what amazes me is that how the kids that are in the same condition, man, they find each other and they flock together, and then you got your little pack. Sorry, Jesus. See, I gotta keep my hands down.
You're being abusive now.
Yeah, but I mean, did you see that?
Well, I did. It's on camera now. You can't run from it.
No, not that. The high school thing. Jesus forgave me already. No, we're good.
Camera, you can't run from it, buddy.
No, we're owning it.
You're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, you fall into your groups. And it's funny because I had that same discussion with my granddaughter Delilah yesterday. But
wow,
you fall into these groups.
Yeah.
And when us Gen Xers, I think we experienced it more towards the high school years and things like that. Now these kids nowadays are experiencing it a lot younger.
That's earlier. They're exposed to a lot of stuff. I mean, they used to try to keep us from watching.
Yeah, but even just the peer influence now. Delilah's in 6th grade, and we're running into that 6th grade angst kind of thing of, I don't know where I fit in at, because now we got the football players, we've got the cheerleaders, we've got the basketball players. Where do I fit in at? And so
you got this connection in your hand too with the cell phone, man, and people are just saying ugly stuff all the time.
Yes.
And so, I mean, I can't even imagine. I mean, I didn't feel like I felt in, that I fit in. And, that would have just made it 10 times worse if I had to carry that with me at night.
Exactly. I look back now and I think, man, if we had social media back when we were kids, can you imagine? I'd be so messed up right now that, there probably not any way I'd be sitting right here.
Well, I don't know, man. Sure. I just got the thought that maybe we'd have been better off, because what we did do? We'd go up to each other's face and we'd just insult each other then,
We did.
And then with the men, well, you'd end up with a little scuffle. And then the funny thing is that afterwards, man, y'all would end up being best friends.
Yeah.
So, that guy will fight. So, I mean, heck, let's just be friends.
Been there, done that too many times.
Yeah, but that was the natural flow. Well, now you don't say anything. You think up something all day long. You go home and you hide in the closet and you just send it over something ugly. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's real brave.
But no, that was my story through high school. I was rebellious. I was the typical Gen X high school kid, trying to make my peace with life and not being very good at it.
Trying to figure yourself out.
Yeah. And, going back to the social media, if we'd have had the social media back then, there's no telling where either one of us would have ended up at if we'd have had that influence.
I know.
Peer influence was bad enough.
Yeah.
But the peer influence is what really kept me out of church during my high school years.
Not only that, man, you're a pretty smart guy, man. So you figured out how you could just, I'm working.
Oh yeah,
and you hid the fact that, oh man, it's also a great benefit that I don't have to go to church.
Yeah.
A place I'm not understanding right now.
I wouldn't say that I wasn't smart. I wouldn't say that I was smart. I was just taking advantage of what I had available to me at the time.
Hey, that's the kind of smart that I was talking about.
Yeah. The devil was sitting there. He's like, hey, if you can work this extra shift, you can make a little extra money, put a little more gas in the truck, and
you don't have the
flip
things
side
you
of
want.
that, you don't have to go to church.
So, do you graduate from high school?
Graduated from high school in 1984 there in Monahans. Yeah. 84. Sounds like a lifetime ago, doesn't it?
That does, man. I was in 82, just so you'll know. So.
Oh, you old man.
I'll be 62 in about a week.
No, I graduated from high school in '84, and my dad had always worked in the oil field, so my granddad had worked in the oil field. So what did I do? I started chasing oil field money. That's where good money was at. I was not that I was doing bad where I was at, but I mean, it was at a point where I was expected to step up and
Follow the
get me the
footsteps.
full-time job and get out and make your way in the world as a man. And that was kind of the speech that I got from my dad at the time. And I did. I went to work in the oil field. I started out on a roustabout crew, building tank batteries, laying pipeline, things like that.
So is this just something that kids in Moynihan can go to, or did your grandfather and your dad, did they help you get involved with it, or how did that go?
It's typical in Monahans. It's in West Texas, it's fairly typical for guys that graduate high school. They'll find a job in the oil field of some type because the money normally is good. It's always better than what you were making going through high school. That's for sure. I mean, you're living like a king, working in the oil field because you're making good money. You're working a lot of hours.
Yeah.
You may be working 80, 90 hours a week and not have time to spend much of it, but you're making good money, and that was the draw. And besides that, that's where all your friends were going too.
Yeah.
And then if you're working in the oil field, you're working all these days, and guess what? You're not going to church.
Yeah, man, you can't get to church, man. I'm trying to keep this job.
Yeah. Church has already started by the time you get off on Wednesday, so you're not there Wednesday night. Sunday, if you're not working, you're trying to rest up because you have to be back at it at 5 o'clock Monday morning. So
yeah. So what are your still at this point? I mean, what are your feelings about God? So I mean, you're leaning into your work, so But I mean, do you have thoughts about God? Or are you still questioning, or what's going on?
I do. I mean, it was never a deal where I lost my faith. I never lost my faith. I always had that. I always knew God was there.
Right.
I like to, I tell people that my life has been like a reoccurring episode of Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader?
Okay. Well, are you?
Not really.
No.
I'm not even smarter than a third grader most days.
I haven't beaten one of those shows, and I've tried.
My grandson's a third grader, and he's teaching me stuff every day. So, but now I tell people my life is like a recurring episode of Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? Because you're given all this information as a kid. We're taught all these things as kids. If you grow up in church, you're taught, the way you should live your life, the way you should, have a relationship with God. And then as you get older, you still have that information, but it's tucked away back here somewhere, and you got to work to retrieve it. And that's how that game show went. You get somebody who's in their 30s and 40s, and they're on this game show with the fifth graders sitting there, and they're pulling up information they were taught in fifth grade, and being asked questions about things they were taught in fifth grade, and they can't recall it.
Sure.
Well, that's how I was as I got older. I had all that information. I'd been taught all these things. I knew it.
Right.
It was still back there, but my recall was getting worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
I started getting into more of a life of running around, and, it's not that I wasn't thinking of God, because I always felt that, God in the background going, hey, that's not right. Hey, that's not right.
Yeah.
I always had that. God never left me. I was running from him. I was doing everything I could to stay away.
Yeah.
But he never left me. He was always there.
Oh, for sure.
Just on the outside going, I'm still here. When it gets bad enough, when you finally reach that point, you still know that I'm here. So as after I got out of high school, went to work in the oil field, was really working hard, spending all the time, doing the things that I was taught that a man is supposed to do. I got further and further away from church and further away from thinking about God on a daily basis, praying. There was times I'd go for ages, it seemed, without praying. I was the typical, what we used to refer to as foxhole Christian. When things got bad enough, I would pray.
Sure.
But it was an act of desperation. It wasn't anything where it was, when I was saying these prayers, I knew it wasn't sincere. It was an outcry. That was what it was.
I think,
but there was very little sincerity to it. It was an act of desperation at that point.
Yeah.
So I spent, those few years after high school just kind of living my life the way I wanted and kind of telling God, I know you're there and I'll call you when I need you. But, I this is something that
you were trying to do it on your own.
I was doing my own terms.
Rules, your own terms. Thanks, brother.
I was doing my own terms. God's terms were always there, and I knew they were there. But these are my terms. I'm gonna do things the way I want right now. And there was a lot of scares in there where I shouldn't be sitting here right now.
Amen.
There was a lot of times in the oil field where things would happen.
Oh, God.
And it's a wonder that I'm still sitting here.
I wanted to say that that's the culture too, man. Is that for the oil field, and I never worked in it, but there's lots of other stuff that the manly things that it's the culture is work hard, play hard.
It is,
and
it
so
really is.
When those guys get off, they tend to want to one up each other on the.
Oh yeah, it's Friday night after payday. Everybody's hanging out at the bar and. Half your paycheck gets spent in a 5-6 hour period. And then you got to wake up and face the music the next morning. But, you're right. It's a work hard, play hard environment. And it's all about, the manly thing you're supposed to be doing is working. And
I just got tingles again.
It's, it's really sad that, we don't seem to evolve too far from that. Even now, at 60 years old, I still see it where you see this work hard, play hard mentality, and God gets put in the background.
Yeah, and He can. And I see the same thing. It's very similar. And I mean, well, heck, I'm going to be 62 next week, and so we're the same age, and so. I did that through the Marine Corps and stuff. That's all that manly stuff. And I don't know. It's just crazy, really.
Yeah. I mean, we, as men, I think we do so much searching for things that, are going to make us, I don't want to say feel more like men, but maybe appear more like what somebody else thinks we should be.
Well, it was closer to the time, man, with our grandfathers especially, but even my dad. But, man, I mean, you couldn't cry. I mean, suck it up. I'll give you something to cry about. Hush up. I mean, that was the culture. And so that was just an extension of that. And that's the same thing, man. You don't, you get hurt real bad out there, man. You're going to do your best not to cry in front of your buddies, man, because you'll always be the guy that, you got hurt. But
yeah, you didn't show emotion, unless it was anger at somebody.
Unless it was anger. And then you beat somebody up.
Yeah, you didn't show emotion unless it was anger, and then it was time to fight. Then,
yeah,
there was very very little emotional maturity, at that point.
Unless what the good news is, I think that things have changed, since then to a certain extent, and hopefully, it doesn't seem as bad as that. Maybe people are. I don't see the young guys fighting as much. Of course, I'm not hanging out with young guys who are fighting, but
no, I'm not either. And I think I've passed my prime in my fighting years. So
you're doing well in the oil field. I mean, you're doing the oil field rules, and you're doing real good at that.
I was, and then everything just came apart. You look at the mid to late '80s when oil field ebbs and flows. You've got what we call oil field rich, where you're working all the hours, you're buying the boat, you're buying the new trucks, you're buying the house, and then the price of oil crashes. They start stacking the rigs out. They're not drilling oil wells like they were before. The service industries are starting to shut down because the work is not there. And I ended up at a point where I was living in my car.
Oh, my goodness. And where is this at?
This was in Monahans.
Still in Monahans.
Monahans. I was still right there where I grew up at.
Couldn't get a job, and you're in your car now.
Well, you would have a job for a few weeks, and then you would have maybe a month or so where things would pick back up, and companies would hire again, and then everything would drop back off again, and last hired, first fired.
Yeah.
So I went through that for a couple of years, and at one point I was living in my car. Those little cans of beanie weenies.
I do.
I don't know if they still sell them or not, but
I think I can find you some.
That was my meal 3 times a day.
Yeah.
I was eating beanie weenies 3 times a day because that's all I had money for.
Yeah. Were you still getting beer and stuff?
No.
No. Man, you're so bad off you couldn't get your beer.
I couldn't even beg somebody for beer because nobody else had money either. So,
yeah. Oh my gosh,
it was bad. I mean, it got really bad there for a while, and like I said, it was one of those times when God was saying, "Okay, I'm
still here.
I've let you do this. I've let you do the things that you wanted to do. Look where it got you. Look where you're at."
He was gently telling you
you're sleeping
things.
in the bed of a Chevy truck at night, and I'm still here. Or what are we going to do? Are you smarter than a fifth grader now?
Oh man,
are you going to go back to that little bit of knowledge that I gave you as a kid?
This is gold, brother.
And
tell us how this is going, man.
I didn't do it. I still didn't do it. God was sitting there poking and prodding me.
What is wrong with us, man?
I was stubborn. I still am a lot of times.
Amen.
Don't let. I hope Kaisa's going to watch this and say she still is stubborn.
All right, we're going to get her on after, just so you'll know.
I'm going to forbid that one. I want to be in the room while you're interviewing.
Yeah.
But no, I was really at a rock bottom. I really was at a point in my life where I didn't have a place to live. Like I said, I was living in my truck. I was eating beanie weenies, those little cans of beanie weenies 3 times a day. And God was still there. I knew it was him. He was saying, "Okay, we've done this your way. Let me try to get you back where you're supposed to be." And I still pushed away.
Isn't it so wonderful about him? Is he just allows us this free will, and he just sits there. And I know it must be breaking his heart to watch you suffer. I mean, like watch your kid do something like that.
Yeah.
And it's just, amazing. But he's just stood there to make himself available for the minute that you might change your mind.
And that's it. He's waiting for the minute that you change your mind.
Yeah.
And it's even hitting rock bottom. I've got to do this my way. I've got to do this my way. For me, it was more of a, I remember thinking, okay, I put myself in this situation. I need to pull myself out of this situation because nobody's going to respect me unless I do.
You're going to come up with a plan on your own, and you're going to fix this.
I'm going to fix it.
Okay, well, tell us about that.
Well, my plan was to go in the military.
Oh my God!
I was 24 years old and had gone through all these ups and downs. Living in my truck, sleeping in the back end of my truck. My truck gets repossessed. So now I don't even have that. So I'm at a point where I'm like, okay, I've got to start making some real decisions here. I've got to do something because otherwise I know the path I'm going to go.
You're starting to feel it.
I know the path I'm going to go because the temptation is already there. We've had this conversation before. I didn't get into the drugs or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I had a funny feeling that's where it was headed.
Just the natural next step.
I needed an escape at that point. The pressure was to the point to where I needed an escape.
Well, listen, man, when we start to get to the point where we realize that we're the reason for our shame and our disappointment and our, fallen, it's hard to take.
It really is. At that point, I didn't have my dad as an influence in my life. My dad had an aneurysm in 84, just not long after I graduated. And mentally, he had the mentality of a 5-year-old because it had done so much damage to his brain. So I didn't have that influence in my world for him to say, this is some manly advice. This is advice from your dad. I've been there. Don't make this mistake.
Yeah.
Because he'd been an alcoholic. He once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic is
Amen.
But I didn't have him there to give me that advice. And I knew that I was headed down that road. I could see it because I needed an escape. I needed something to break me free from.
To not think about that stuff for 1 minute. And people don't understand that.
They don't get it. And
that's what the drinking is about.
That's what the drinking is about. And like I said, at the time, I couldn't afford the drinking. But there were plenty of people out there that wanted to give me some dope.
They always give it to you for free to begin with.
Free the first time.
Amen.
Then they'll they get you hooked, and then okay, well now we're going to start stealing stuff to pay for it.
Oh God!
But I never did that. I decided, okay, well I've got to do something, and so I went and talked to a recruiter, explained the whole situation to him.
So what's the first recruiter that you went to? What branch?
Well, I'd talked to Army while I was in high school still. I'd talked to Army recruiter, and I went and talked to them. And I hadn't taken the ASVAB test yet, so I went and talked to them, and they wanted me to take the ASVAB test. Well, I walked out of there, and I just didn't have a good vibe. I already knew that the recruiters were going to, leave me a line to try to get me to sign the paper. So I walked around the corner, and the Marines they were out.
They were on break.
Well, they were probably out working in high school somewhere. The Air Force was the next one.
Yeah.
And I walked by them going over to the Navy recruiter because my dad had been in the Navy. And back up a little bit. So I backed up and I walked in the recruiter's office and sat there for probably a better part of 2 hours and just explained my situation to him. I just let it all out, told him, look, this is where I'm at in life. And he said, well, let's get you to take the test and we'll see where we're at as far as job-wise and things like that. We'll work from there. He didn't promise me anything. He didn't try to, and I think that's one thing. The one reason why I went the route that I did with the Air Force is he didn't try to sell me. He just said, let's get you the test and let's see where you're at, and then we'll talk about it after that.
He seemed on the level, and he was. It sounded sensible.
And I was in a hurry. Because I was at that point where I just didn't have anything left.
I want to have a nice place to lay my head and sleep, a warm place to lie down and eat hot meals.
Even if I've got somebody yelling at me, at 6 o'clock in the morning, and a bunch of loud music blaring on the speakers.
Yeah.
But he didn't try to sell me. So that's what pushed me towards the Air Force. And then, like I said, I was in a hurry because I didn't have anything at that point.
Yeah.
I still had God. God was still poking and prodding me going, hey, look,
You were still leading that relationship.
Yeah, there's a church. I was. That's a good way to put it. I was leading that relationship. I was not letting God lead me. I was trying to lead that dance, so to speak.
Isn't it funny how he just allows that? Because he knows he's just sitting there waiting for the time that, that you're going to come around.
That whole omniscience thing is, being omnipotent and omniscient, knowing everything is going to happen. It's got to be a wonderful thing.
Well, think about this, Ken. It just came to me, man, that he's standing next to each and every person in the world, man. Yeah. I mean, how amazing is that?
He is.
And you were a handful, okay?
I was a handful. And I was not done being a handful, that's for sure. But like I said, I didn't have any place else to go. I was at my wit's end. I was at the very end, and I was at a point where I was going to start making some very bad decisions in my life. So I went in the Air Force.
I'm interested in this because I'm a military guy. So what on the test, what did they say that you would be good, and what did y'all decide you were going to be in?
I scored real high mechanical.
Yeah.
I scored real high mechanical, which is odd because
Born a mechanic.
I have to have a YouTube video to do anything now. So
that is wonderful.
I don't know what I ever did without YouTube. I used to fix things all the time without YouTube. I don't know what happened to me. I've become technology dependent, I guess.
I think things were simpler back then.
They were much simpler.
No, I'm at the same time. I'm not saying that.
No, I'm serious. It was a much simpler time, as far as, the things that you could do for yourself anyway. But I had scored high mechanical, so I went in with a guaranteed job as an F-16 crew chief.
Oh, my.
So, did some time with that, had a break, and then...
So, listen, man, I mean, you're broken in some way, but, I mean, you're doing all these amazing things. I mean, that's a pretty important job. You got to have some kind of brain work happening there to be able to do that, right?
I give God the credit for pushing me in that direction.
Okay.
God knew at that point that I wasn't going to turn around and walk through the front door of the church.
Yeah.
He knew it.
Yeah.
So God pushed me in a direction that he knew that I could have a little success, that I could, get a little restart from. And I mean, the military life, I fell right into the military life. I was okay with that.
Yeah.
I've been making all these big decisions, and I was okay with having somebody yell at me, 24 hours a day for the next 6 to 8 weeks, and having somebody set my schedule for me. All I got to do is get up and go run. I can do that. All I got to do is, go to PT. I can do that. Oh, we're going to go have chow. in a nice chow
I
hall.
like that.
Oh, you want
it's
to yell at me in the chow hall too? Okay, that's fine. I'm still getting to eat. I'm not eating 3 cans of beanie weenies a day.
Oh man, those beanie weenies are gone.
Oh yeah, they're gone, man. That's history. I'm beanie weenies. What are those?